So this morning, in the first place, I greet all of you and hope you had a very good weekend. Hope you have been able to rest and come with more energy so we can end our forum today. We will begin by listening to the reports of the 3 regional parallel sessions on strengthening the engagement of indigenous peoples with IFAD at the country and regional level. And then we will read the second draft of the synthesis of deliberation, and we will go into the discussion paragraph by paragraph. We hope with that, this morning, we will approve the synthesis of deliberation that will be presented this afternoon to IFAD staff. So, going into the reports, we will ask Victoria Haraseb from Africa to report in 5 minutes right from your seat. Please go ahead, Victoria.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Chair, for this opportunity. Good morning, colleagues. Allow me to present to you the summary of the African meeting as outlined by the team. First of all, we acknowledge the hard work done by IFAD and the entire staff, and also we are grateful to the policy framework which has the projects on indigenous people, and we also acknowledge the help that comes through IPAF, which is visible, and we are really grateful to that. From our presentation, we actually listened to the IFAD on basically what they are doing currently in the region of Africa, whereby they were giving us the feedback on their draft action plan. And from what we received was that there are some projects that are coming up, especially in Ethiopia, and that they are busy with consultations with stakeholders and with different target groups. And they informed us that the investment projects that are in pipeline is the new natural resource management project that is coming up that is already in Kenya, and there will be engagement with indigenous organizations in the design, and also a percentage of total beneficiaries will be targeting indigenous peoples. And also they mentioned that in investment projects ongoing in Kenya is the livestock commercialization project, LLRP in Ethiopia, and another one in Burundi, and so on. So on policy dialogue, IFA said that when they are going on supervision mission, they do consultations to leverage policy dialogue with governments. And on other activities, they said that the focus will be on climate financing, especially the green finance in Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, and Burundi. So we had some interventions from the team, and questions and concerns that was coming through, which I will mention a few. So the concern from the delegates or the participants from the region of Africa was that it was not clear on how beneficiaries were selected in these ongoing projects and how to ensure that indigenous peoples are engaged from the beginning of the projects, from design, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation. So indigenous people wants to be involved in initiatives. They cannot just be involved in initiatives that are already running. So they want to be part and parcel right from the beginning of something as of the design until the last cycle of the project. So, and then the concern was that IFAD works through national governments, hence issues are faced in terms of participation in countries where governments do not recognize indigenous people. So in some countries, governments do not recognize indigenous peoples, and their policy framework is to do with the government. So the participation from our side is limited. And those that is one concern also that came out from the team. And we also mentioned that lack of recognition of traditional knowledge in many countries is a barrier also to acknowledge in order to define strategies to address the issues. So when traditional knowledge of our communities are not acknowledged, it is very, very difficult. So indigenous people also want to be involved from the stages, as I said, from start to the end. And the COSOPs, as they have COSOPs as their entry points, it is the key for indigenous people to participate in the formulation of a country strategy. So it will help us also to start with our governments from the start of the projects. So we are saying that there is a need to strengthen the linkage between IPs and their organizations and IFAD, particularly at the country and regional level, not only IFAD headquarters. So when we raised these concerns, we actually got some feedback on some of the issues, which was as follows, that IFAD say that they have provided us with information on how the targeting is conducted, even though it is not clear to many, and the different stages of project cycle and how the participation of IBs can be ensured, including a design, development of action plans for indigenous peoples, implementation and supervision, support, supervision missions, midterm reviews, monitoring and evaluation. So other key instruments to ensure the participation of IPs is the policy and free, prior and informed consent, SECAP, COSOPs as entry points to ensure IPs issues and priorities are taken on board. So with that, participants agreed on some conclusions. Number one, to say that the importance is to ensure that in the next forum, representatives from indigenous peoples, even the project staff at the country level who successfully engage in the design of IFAD projects are invited to the forum with us so we can sit around the table and have a dialogue. And it is the key for IPs to participate in the design of COSOPs and projects. There is a need to improve collaboration with IFAD, particularly at the national and regional level. And IFAD should provide suggestions and guidance on what is achievable, feasible. The idea to have focal point at IFAD to link with representatives of indigenous organizations might be explored. And effort is needed on both sides, IFAD and IPs. IFAD may lobby, advocate to push national governments to implement what they committed to in the framework of COP15. And in conclusion, as much as we have raised all of these concerns, we are grateful, and we know that there is always room to improve, not only from IFAD side, but also from us as indigenous people. And we should actually also look at the recommendations from the regional consultations to see what can be done, that each person, the governments, IFAD, and indigenous peoples can take on the responsibilities that has been mentioned in the recommendations. And with that, I want to say thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, for sharing the summary of the discussion on Africa region. I invite John Carling to present Asia. Yes.
Okay. Yes. Good morning to everyone. I'm sharing the Asia report, but just to give a background, the meeting was attended by 5 IFAD staff with the regional director co-moderating the meeting the whole time. And she said she was in a listening mode, which is a demonstration, I think, of a great interest from the management level. Unfortunately, while there's interest from other IFAD staff in other countries, the timing of the meeting was in the middle of the night in Asia, so it was rather difficult for them to join the meeting, although they have expressed interest that they want to participate. So with the I will focus the presentation more on the feedback from indigenous peoples as well as the remarks from our IFAD colleagues. So it's quite very similar, I think, to what our indigenous brothers in Africa has mentioned. Largely, it again relates to the meaningful participation of indigenous peoples at the country level that is consistently being suggested, and that there should be mechanism on how to do that on a regular basis. A working group or a coordinating committee can be set up, whatever is appropriate. Although IFAD said there may be challenges in some countries because they only have few staff, 2, for example, because we're also suggesting a focal person, but that's the challenge that's been expressed at the country level in Asia, where they IFAD at the moment have very few staff. So just then to proceed with some of the key recommendations. One is that we need capacity building for all the actors, capacity building for indigenous peoples in relation to understanding the IP policy, for example, and how IFAD operates, especially at the country level, so that they can engage better. We also need capacity building for IFAD staff and also governments, also for them to be familiar with the updated IP policy, but also to understand better the rights, well-being, needs, priorities, and perspectives, as well as aspirations of indigenous peoples, and to be able to work with indigenous peoples with cultural sensitivity, especially at the national level. So in this context, it's also recommended that IFAD project staff to be in direct contact with indigenous organizations and involve them in the implementation of IFAD projects as appropriate. As I mentioned, at the country level, IFAD should appoint an indigenous focal person in order for the IP people to have a clear line of coordination and communication where possible. Suggestions for, this is already there. There's also the suggestion to focus or for in the case of Central Asia, suggestion to focus interventions that also account for local heirlooms, seed diversity in relation, of course, to the enhancement of traditional knowledge. So as the theme on now that we're discussing is on climate leadership, it's important that the knowledge, experiences, and innovations and initiatives of indigenous peoples are integrated. Then the delegates also welcome the synergy between EPAF and IFAD projects. At least there are steps taken to synergize the two, and consider how to scale up some of the IPAF projects into IFAD political investments in this regard. And finally, it's also important to take for the MNE to take stock and participate and conduct participatory documentation of previous IFAD engagement with IPs to gather lessons and provide feedback. And for this, I want to emphasize the point of participatory, because it's important to capture the perspectives, especially those that are involved or affected in the project implementation at the local level. And finally, just to also stress the commitments made or the response made by IFAD officials, that they will share the feedback on the outcome of the discussions and ensure that the information goes to the country level. Because like I mentioned, many of them were not able to attend due to the time constraint, the time zone. And IFAD will share a list of the country directors for each country, so each member knows who to approach in their respective countries. And this is aimed to enhance communication between IFAD and indigenous peoples. And IFAD will explore how best it can engage with IP groups accounting for its limited human resource at the country level, which I already mentioned earlier. For Central Asia countries, IFAD will link with IP focal persons to discuss how IFAD can develop collaboration at the country level. And IFAD will also explore how best it can better foster linkages with rights-based approach organizations as suggested in the forum. And IFAD invited IP groups to see how best they could organize themselves to have a focal person. So this is more for the indigenous also, that we should organize ourselves and designate a working group or a focal person to engage with IFAD, because engagement takes the two together. And finally, IFAD recognizes that it needs to improve the delivery practice of FPIC, and IFAD is piloting the FPIC process in a number of countries. So just to conclude, that the general observation in Asia is there is an advancement and an improvement from the engagement of IFAD at the country level, but this is, however, uneven. There are countries where there's more regular communication and coordination, while in other countries this is still a big challenge for them to have that kind of regular engagement. And again, to emphasize that we need to improve on this, especially in the context of the COSOPs that are coming up, including midterm assessments, but also in upcoming projects, to ensure that at the outset there is meaningful participation of indigenous peoples in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Now I invite Diana Domico from Latin America to report.
Emerana manasama panu manama minya harajimu bede de pemata ina manapa minya única walamani. Un saludo desde la distancia, abrazos a sus corazones, a sus familias, a sus territorios, a sus abuelos y a sus ancestras. En este momento quiero dirigirme hacia ustedes y conversar un poco de lo que dialogamos en nuestra sesión. Si bien tuvimos acompañamiento de varios miembros y presidentes de la región, agradecemos también de que hayan estado participando de manera activa y de forma virtual, 20 personas que nos acompañaron en la sesión, a los compañeros, hermanos y hermanas que estuvieron en esta reunión y que dieron sus aportes. Agradecemos también que de una u otra manera nos haya acompañado la directora regional, quien estuvo en primera instancia iniciando esta sesión, pero también que para un futuro pueda hacer su mejor esfuerzo para poder acompañarnos en toda la sesión, ya que somos hermanos y hermanas indígenas que hemos venido de diferentes lugares del mundo y estamos aquí, sesionando y hablando de lo importante y la importancia del buen vivir de nuestros territorios para un futuro para nuestras generaciones. Quiero resaltar un poco también que hemos dado unas sugerencias y esa sugerencia es que se pueda hacer un mejor proceso articulado en los territorios, que se pueda hacer un proceso tejido, como lo dicen nuestros abuelos y nuestras abuelas, nuestros mayores y mayoras, para que los procesos cuando se llegue a territorios sea de la mejor manera, que sea una acción que haga buenos y dé buenos resultados y beneficios que antes estar evitando una acción con daño. También hemos sugerido a que haya un proceso intergeneracional, un proceso que sea pensado desde los territorios hacia las comunidades y hacia las generaciones. Quiero resaltar entonces, para no extenderme mucho, unos puntos que se resaltaron de esta sesión regional. Y es que la sesión recomendó fortalecer las relaciones a nivel de país entre el foro y el staff del FIDA. Las necesidades del diálogo constante, considerando los cambios del staff del FIDA, que debe de existir un compromiso también entre los pueblos indígenas para fortalecer las redes nacionales, regionales y generar canales de participación. Esto puede dar pie a un mapeo de organizaciones indígenas para que puedan contar con esta información y poderlas involucrar. ¿Qué quiere decir esto? De que va a haber una mejor participación, va a haber un mejor diálogo, va a haber unas redes de articulación con las organizaciones de cada uno de los países. También se llama fortalecer un mejor diálogo y vernos de manera más recurrente para mirar nuestros planes regionales, que no sea a largo tiempo estos encuentros, sino que pueda ser más periódicamente y que desde ahí se puedan hacer mejores diálogos. Se recomendó también incluir consultores indígenas en todo el proceso del proyecto. En el comité directivo del foro, el foro puede asesorar también e identificar estos consultores. La idea de estos consultores es que se pueda también preguntarle a las organizaciones, al comité, que se pueda consultar y que estos sean quienes recomienden a estos consultores y que puedan hacer un mejor trabajo con las organizaciones, pero también con el IFAD. También se recomendó, que la participación, que esta participación no reemplaza, obviamente, los mecanismos de gobernanza de los pueblos indígenas. ¿Esto qué quiere decir? De que si una persona que es consultora o consultor llega a ser asesor, no quiere decir que esté representando de una u otra manera a esa organización, sino que es un enlace y es un puente que estaría un poco visionando y mostrando cómo es el mundo de los pueblos indígenas y que es una persona como asesora también que estaría explicando cómo se puede trabajar de una manera mucho más armónica, que se debe de garantizar sin duda la consulta previa libre e informada. La consulta libre previa e informada a veces pareciera que se entendiera que es solamente consultar y que solamente con un diálogo se puede solucionar cosas. No, creo que la consulta previa, ahí se explicaba un poco de que la consulta previa libre e informada requiere de que sea dialogado, de que sea consultado y que los pueblos sean quienes digan si sí o no. También se dialogó, el IFAD está en un proceso de selección, los directores de país darán su opinión. Será necesario que durante este sexto ciclo se determinen sinergias de aprendizajes y escalamiento. Quedó también expresado de que hay una necesidad de diálogo constante para la operacionalización de la política de pueblos indígenas del FIDA. Y también se conversó de que estos insumos se desarrollarán en un plan regional con el personal del FIDA. Si bien finalizaría con esto, pero quiero informar algo pequeño, y es que fue importante este diálogo de toda la región, porque ahí tuvimos también, vimos el mapeo general en donde se pudo ver de que se decía estamos trabajando, por ejemplo, en Salvador, estamos trabajando, por ejemplo, en Colombia, estamos trabajando en varios países, pero las personas que somos de esos países queríamos conocer un poco con qué organizaciones indígenas estaban trabajando. La respuesta fue un poco, todavía no hemos tenido, digamos, que ese enlace, o si lo tenemos, o estamos haciendo un acercamiento. Y gracias a ese espacio se pudo sugerir entonces el decir que aquí estábamos nosotros también, ¿cierto? Están las organizaciones, están las mujeres, están los jóvenes, están las autoridades indígenas, y que son las personas perfectas para hacer un diálogo, que son esas personas que hacen el enlace directo con las comunidades, a esas comunidades que no están llegando el gobierno, a esas comunidades que estamos llegando justamente nosotros, porque somos de ese lugar, somos del territorio, y que somos las personas quienes estamos en este momento aquí sentados, y que era una oportunidad perfecta para poder articular el proceso en conjunto con las organizaciones de parte del FIDA, pero así que podíamos hacer también nosotros ese proceso articulado desde las organizaciones de nuestros países hacia las comunidades. Dejo hasta ahí, les agradezco mucho. Gracias.
Thank you, Diana. So we have received the 3 regional reports. Now, what should be the next step? We need to conclude the regional action plans that will give us a basis for monitoring for the 7th forum. So in the regional consultations, before we come back to the 7th global meeting, we need to meet with the regions to monitor if that regional plan has been implemented or not. Now, what are the things that have been highlighted? One, participation of indigenous peoples in COSOPs. So we need to be very clear in each region what COSOPs will be discussed in the next 2 years. And we need the report from IFAD and from the focal points of indigenous peoples in each country of how we really participate in the COSOPs. The second is projects. And we have mentioned in each one of the regions participation in projects from design until evaluation. So we will also need to include in those regional action plans what are the upcoming projects, what are the projects now in course in each one of our countries that involve indigenous peoples, and we should monitor with the regions every 3 or 4 months, at least 3 or 4 times in the year, to be really sure that our recommendations are being considered. The third aspect is the learning. What are we learning together? What is being documented? And based on those learning and those lessons, what can be improved? The fourth are the exchanges. So what exchanges are there in place or considered, and South-South, whatever name they can have, but exchanges. Then policy dialogues. What are the policy dialogues that will be supported by IFAD at the region or country level in the next 2 years? So we can really follow up on that. And of course, we have mentioned in all the meetings resources. And there's a commitment when we met with the 12 replenishment that at least 10 of IFAD projects would include indigenous peoples. And we heard about 3 between the 5th and the 6th global meeting. But we also heard about a commitment to improve, to increase more countries. So resource allocation that can really reach indigenous peoples. That's another indicator that we need to follow in these action plans. And the last one is IPAF-IFAD relation. And we have, this is something that we have to discuss, because one, IPAF-IFAD, the first is leveraging funds from IFAD for IPAF, because we appreciate that IPAF receives support from bilateral donors. But we also want to see with how much resources does IFAD leverage, so we can increase the amount of projects that are supported by IPAF. And of course, the relation at country level for IPAF-IFAD, let's say, increase of relations or lessons or whatever, or what is called upscaling or whatever, because we can have a different concept of scaling than growth. It's not what is bigger for us, is what includes quality, what includes cultural relevance for indigenous peoples. That is another aspect of upscaling that we would like to see. So I think we should ask, maybe just before that, we have to remember that the updated policy includes a responsibility on all of us, because the new policy expect that or approve that we can participate as indigenous delegates in the executive board meetings when they are discussing issues that are related with indigenous peoples. For us to improve the quality of our participation in the executive board meetings, we need to have what each one of the regions have highlighted: very strong relation with country manager, very strong relation at regional levels, because if not, we will come to the executive board meetings without any information. So this requires, as you have highlighted, a reciprocal responsibility from IFAD and responsibility from indigenous participants. So these, I would say, are the elements that we have to consider to finish drafting these regional action plans. So Ilaria, when can we expect those regional action plans? And what else do we need to do at regional levels to really gather all the information for them?
Can I
Sure, John.
Yeah, thank you for that. Sorry, I forgot to mention that there's a strong recommendation also from Asia that the resources should also be allocated for us to be able to do our internal coordination and communication for the participation of indigenous peoples, especially in Asia. We're coming from different languages. and so it's not easy to coordinate if there is no support to be able to do that at the regional level. So that's just to add that point. I forgot to mention. Thank you.
I see a hand. Yes. Go ahead, brother. And then Joseph.
Okay, so I'm Lawrence Bondo from Liberia. I actually see that the presentation from the regions, I mean, from the different continents was actually in place. But to be honest with you, there's one thing that is still missing. That sounds like it might be like a marginalized in terms of project implementation. I want to add that in the process that all of us can include that what IFAD has for IFAD or IFAD has for IPAD should be directed to contract directly. So it's not like you get to throw up the projects and you expect that people just apply. So what comes to Africa, if it is 10 projects for Africa, it should be for Africa. If it is 10 projects for the Pacific, 10 projects for the Pacific. Then we know that whoever is applying in the Pacific, we can mobilize all the people in the Pacific or in Africa to fight for that project. And then don't just allow the project comes to Africa, maybe 10 projects, then you just relax. But you have to help to mitigate those projects to ensure that that project is actually won by the people. Then the issue you just mentioned about monitoring, for me, I think monitoring should go beyond just to sit in room or maybe sit at a regional level and decide. But you can go in there, and if like the people are doing renewable energy, you can even access them to reach their potential and be able to come up with a success story. I think that's the level at which I want to see IPA goes, to be able to generate whatever money they do, they should be able to assist, ensure that whatever money they put there is visible and it is realistic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Joseph?
Well, good morning, and thank you, the chair, for giving me the floor. And thank you for the region for making those very practical recommendations and they were forward. Coming from Africa and particularly Kenya in this case, what I don't think we have captured well, and I suggest that the IFAD team to capture as a way of moving forward. I think one of the challenges implementing some programs and activities is the relationship between indigenous peoples and line ministries that are responsible for this IFAD relationship need to be looked into very carefully. The Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Livestock and Finance in Kenya in particular are very strong institutions that, as we move to the country dialogue, as we move to the regional dialogue, these ministries are going to be very, very critical for us to be able to realize what we have recommended. And therefore, I'm just pulling out those ministries that are going to be very central in moving forward what, capturing the opportunities and minimizing the challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. Devashi?
Thank you, Mirna. Two things. One was with regard to the draft, and I think really good work has been done. I had some very minor friendly suggestions, but whenever the floor is there, I don't need to speak on the floor. I can put it in writing and give it. My more substantive matter is with regard to how perhaps in addition to improving the relationship between indigenous peoples and IFAD at country levels, also explore the leadership role of IFAD among the Rome-based agencies at country, if not leadership, at least whatever, with FAO and WFP, because that's where, like Joseph was mentioning, the ministries of agriculture, food, environment, forests, etc., relate to, indigenous peoples are able to have a better a working relationship with those ministries at country levels.
Thank you. You have the floor there. Yeah, sorry about the name.
Hania. Thank you, Chair. I have some suggestion through this one, but I will give it after. But now I just want to mention that I am well aware of IFAD's policies and the types of project allocation, but we are constantly improving our process. It would be very good to consider the allocation of projects regardless of policies in this back and forward. As a person who comes from a country that has always been under the sanctions, I don't want to talk about the sanctions itself, but we should also keep in mind that now that we are talking more sensitively about indigenous people's role, we must also find a way to protect indigenous people from marginalization even more and separate them from their sanctioned government. Here, let me make this serious suggestion that an independent mechanisms need to be established in IFAD so that financial aid can help the indigenous people in the direction of beneficial climate change measures, regardless of the hindering political considerations. Thank you.
Thank you. So we will close the discussion, I'm sorry, on the regional action plan because we will move to the synthesis of deliberation. But before we close the discussion, I would like to hear from Ilaria, the next steps to get all of the inputs for the regional action plans.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mianna. Yeah, quickly, I mean, coming first to the regional action plans, we had planned this already for Asia because of the problem with timing and the impossibility of having the country directors present during the discussion. But actually, I think it will make sense to have the same approach also for Latin America and Africa, considering that the advancement in the detailed plan were not many, although the discussions, as we heard, was very, very rich. So we will be organizing basically follow-up meetings where we have you, the delegates who attended already the discussions on Friday, with the country directors in the 3 regions in order to finalize the detail of the plans. So we think a realistic timeline should be in the next 2 months to have the plans finalized. We will get back region by region on organizing these virtual meetings. I think it's important to note that this year, for the first time, the regional consultations were led by 3 organizations at regional levels, and it worked quite well. So I think we should have, we can rely also the support on the regional organizations for these meetings, but definitely, IFAD will be there. What was missing, especially for Asia, was more presence of the country director. So we can finalize the plans with the points that have already been indicated, which COSOPs, when the consultations will take place, and so on. Maybe one clarification on the 10 projects. This is a commitment that IFAD made in its 12th replenishment to have at least 10 loan programs that target specifically, that have indigenous peoples as a priority target group. This will help a lot in improving IFAD monitoring systems vis-a-vis those projects. And it's something I introduced very quickly in my presentation on Thursday, but it's something that is making indigenous people's issues much more structured in the monitoring systems of IFAD. Like, as you know, IFAD has some priority areas, and now indigenous peoples is entering into these priority areas with the specific monitoring system in the operations manual and so on. So these are all things that are starting with these projects, and the policy commits to an increased number of projects that target indigenous peoples as priority target group across IFAD 13, 14, and 15, so in the next 10 years. The point on I think that the point on engaging with the regional level ministries, I think it relates a lot to the COSOP consultation. This is again, COSOP is the key entry point, and I think is where we can engage more ministries around those issues. And of course, this can, we'll have a discussion on collaboration among Rome-based agencies later on today, where we would like really to hear your view and advice on how to strengthen that. And I think, this is very evident from these days of discussion, that the issue is not global policy, the instruments we have at IFAD level, the issue is how to make them operational at country level. So this is definitely something that we can do also through the UN country teams and the Rome-based agency offices at country level. Yeah, I think these are the main points. Thanks.
Thank you. So the agreement is that we will have regional action plans finalized in the next 2 months. There should be inputs and consultation in the next 2 months, and then we will share that, in which all of you will be invited to participate. And then we will share that with everybody, and that will be the instrument that we will monitor between now and the next global forum. So we move now to the synthesis of deliberation. The synthesis of deliberation is a document that should be short, action-oriented, with recommendations for IFAD governments, indigenous peoples. We have a synthesis of deliberation that is still a little long, but it's what came out from the 2 rounds of drafting among all of us. So we will invite Joanne to read. Please follow while she's reading, so you can see exactly where you want to make amendments or changes. And each one of you has a copy in front of you in English, either English, Spanish, or French. So please follow, because when we make the changes, we will make the changes in English, and then they will amend it to Spanish and French. So to make it much easier, we will work in English, but you can give your inputs in your language, or the language that you are using in this meeting. Joseph?
Thank you, Mina. Well, just wanted some guidance from you, whether we need to go paragraph by paragraph, so that in the event we have comments, we make comments based on a program or paragraph rather than the entire document.
Yes, we will do that. But we will read the entire document before, and then we will go paragraph by paragraph. So when we read it, you know exactly in which paragraph you will make recommendations. So please follow it in your document. Joanne, please.
Yeah, maybe just to mention that of course before I read it, it's just to mention that the purpose of the preamble is to provide the context and the analysis and trends. It's quite rather long here, but in any case, and then the recommendation. So I believe let's not make the preamble longer. So I suggest that only substantive, or even cut it if possible, and let's put more attention to the recommendations, because this is the one that will really go to the Governing Council. So with that note, I'll read word by word. The 6th Global Meeting of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD. The 6th Global Meeting of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD was held in Rome on 9, 10, and 13 February 2023. The meeting was the culmination of a wide global process of deliberation through regional and sub-regional consultation meetings in Africa, Asia, the Pacific, and Latin America and the Caribbean. The extensive dialogue around the theme of the forum, Indigenous Peoples' Climate Leadership, community-based solutions to enhance resilience and biodiversity, generated key recommendations summarized therein. Preamble. The threats of climate change require bold and creative solutions. It is becoming ever clearer that these solutions are unlikely to be found within the current ways of thinking and acting. There is a need to make space for multiple voices, practices, and knowledge that characterize the diversity of human experience. We Indigenous peoples are among those who are particularly affected by the impacts of climate change, which lead to disruptions to agriculture and other livelihoods, activities, and ecosystems, increase threats to the integrity and security of indigenous lands, territories, and resources, and exacerbate food insecurity. These effects further result in the adoption of unsustainable livelihood strategies, including migration, increased tensions and conflicts with neighbors, and an increased burden on women. Likewise, we are also victims of some climate actions, such as large renewable energy projects and mining of energy transition minerals without our consent and in violation of our rights. These imposed solutions undermine our climate leadership and resilience and destroy our livelihoods and sources of food security. Despite the daunting challenges that we face, we continue to demonstrate resilience and active leadership in different ways, processes, and at all levels, from community-based action to advocacy in national and international arenas, and from practical solutions to the knowledge and understanding needed to advance viable visions for the future. Indigenous community-based adaptation actions are based on traditional technologies, knowledge and capacities, and the incorporation of innovations. These include adjusting agricultural calendars, adopting more resilient varieties of seeds and livestock, diversifying agriculture and livelihood strategies, and conserving water and soil. Additional actions include mitigation measures such as reforestation, land use and territorial planning, life plans anchored in our visions of well-being, sustainable agricultural practices, defense of our lands against encroachments, and community-managed renewable energy plans. We reinforce these actions by strengthening traditional organizational systems and institutions, by building partnerships and solidarity with national and international organizations and other communities, and by conducting advocacy. Indigenous peoples' climate leadership is anchored in our ways of knowing and being, characterized by a deep, intimate, and reciprocal relationship with the land, our community living, our resilient and creative spirit, and our intercultural and long-term outlook. Our climate leadership is also intimately tied to the integrity, security, and health of our lands and territories, and custodianship, robust indigenous social institutions that sustain communities, the vitality of our knowledge systems and spiritual dimension, and supportive social, economic, and political ecology. Indigenous climate action highlights the important role of women as knowledge bearers and transmitters, as anchors and guardians of community life and well-being. Equally, the Indigenous experience points to the important role of young people as the future leaders. Indigenous climate leadership faces challenges, including lack of recognition and understanding of and respect for our governance and decision-making institutions, as well as our rights, in particular, free, prior, and informed consent, discriminatory laws and practices, forced displacement and encroachment on Indigenous lands and territories, failure to make space for Indigenous planning, and exclusion from climate change debates, decision-making, and financing. IFAD has been an important partner to Indigenous peoples, demonstrating tangible efforts to make space for our participation and incorporating and responding to our perspectives in its plans and policies. Based on the frank and open deliberations we have had over the last few months during the consultation process and at this global meeting, we recommend the following. IFAD country programs. First, ensure the meaningful participation of Indigenous peoples in the design, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation of IFAD's strategies, projects, and programs at all levels in order to, 1, align them to our needs, priorities, and aspirations. 2, integrate our values, land tenure, governance, and knowledge systems, taking into account our territorial planning and visioning cycles. And 3, ensure that interventions do not disrupt our systems, but rather strengthen and build on them. Number 2, provide the necessary information and capacity building to enable Indigenous peoples to effectively engage in strategies and in the design, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation of projects and programs, and ensure the participation of Indigenous consultants in these processes. Third, IFAD country teams to actively engage and collaborate with other UN agencies to strengthen complementarity and enhance synergies in supporting the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, UNDRIP. The Indigenous Peoples Forum process and dialogue with Indigenous peoples. For enhanced communication, dialogue, and information sharing with Indigenous peoples, including the participants in the Indigenous Peoples Forum, especially at the national level. This includes through the organization of quarterly meetings, the establishment of country coordination groups, and the identification of focal points at the level of both IFAD country teams and Indigenous peoples organizations. Fifth, ensure that recommendations from the forum are integrated and reflected in the regional action plans to be agreed upon within IFAD's regional divisions. Indigenous peoples climate leadership. 6. Enhance IFAD's leadership role in its engagement with Indigenous peoples to A, promote the respect for the protection of Indigenous peoples' rights and well-being by governments, including through free, prior, and informed consent, especially in countries where no protocols exist. B, foster dialogue and cooperation between Indigenous peoples and government and ensure that the latter are aware of the updated IFAD policy on engagement with Indigenous peoples and of IFAD interventions on the ground. C, mobilize support by other international agencies for indigenous peoples' climate leadership. D, facilitate the meaningful participation of indigenous peoples in climate actions at all levels. 7, invest in building the capacities of indigenous peoples, including to access climate finance and to design and manage projects and programs. As concrete measures, develop an internship program for indigenous leaders and professionals at IFAD. And second, facilitate interlearning exchanges among the partners of Indigenous Peoples Assistance Facility in relation to climate leadership. 8, increase direct support to the initiative of Indigenous peoples with focus on women and youth in climate leadership and resilience, including through the IPAF. IFAD policy on engagement with indigenous peoples. 9, allocate adequate financial and human resources to fully implement the updated IFAD policy on engagement with indigenous peoples. This includes the recruitment of dedicated staff at all levels, including a lead technical specialist, the translation and publication of the policy in indigenous languages, awareness raising and capacity building of indigenous peoples, governments, and IFAD staff, and the development of monitoring tools. 10, develop guidelines and protocols for the meaningful participation of the members of the steering committee of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD as observers at the executive board of IFAD. Okay, so far so good? Okay, now we go to recommendations to governments. 1, develop policies that protect and advance the rights of indigenous peoples and ensure their effective implementation in coordination with our communities and organizations, and by ensuring free, prior, and informed consent and alignment with the UN DRIP. In particular, recognize and protect the integrity of indigenous territories of life and support the development and implementation of Planes de Vida with the necessary technical, financial, and institutional resources. 2, recognize indigenous peoples' contributions to climate action and biodiversity conservation and develop programs, policies, and adequate resources and financing mechanisms that support our climate leadership with special attention to women and youth. This includes direct financing. 3rd, ensure the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples, including women and youth, in discussions, decision-making, and planning processes, including those related to climate and conservation actions at all levels. Commitments as indigenous peoples. As indigenous peoples, we commit to 1, continue to protect and enhance the health and integrity of our lands through sustainable natural resource management practices. 2, revitalize and continue to develop and transmit indigenous values, knowledge, and practices, including our forms of government and decision-making, as key institutions in the stewardship of our lands and territories and in our climate leadership. 3, continue to advocate for indigenous people's rights and well-being and meaningful participation in decision-making processes and debates related to climate change and biodiversity conservation at all levels. 4, continue to build collaboration and solidarity between indigenous peoples in support of our climate leadership, including through the documentation and sharing of our knowledge and experience. Fifth, build the capacities of indigenous women and youth and strengthen their participation in decision-making processes and organizations, recognizing the immense value of their contribution to climate leadership. 6, strengthen the engagement and improve communication with IFAD at all levels. Done. Thank you.
Thank you. How long?
The timing is good.
How long was it?
The timing is
15
good.
minutes? Okay, so how long did it take to be read? No one took time?
It's 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Yeah, we will have to cut a little. Okay, so you have heard the draft of the synthesis of deliberation. We will go now paragraph by paragraph. If you can identify paragraphs, especially in the preamble, that can be cut, we would appreciate. But I suggest that we do not spend too much time in the preamble and we really focus on the recommendations. So let's go to the first paragraph. The 6th global meeting. Any observation, Darío?
No, tengo es una pregunta. Como la metodología que se está proponiendo, es decir, párrafo por párrafo, mi pregunta es si no se puede hacer una observación sobre la integralidad del documento. Es solo una pregunta.
Será ahorita, pero no queremos abrir tanto porque si no nos vamos a atrasar. Adelante.
No, gracias. Lo que sucede es que por razones bueno, quizás de metodología, yo me tomé el atrevimiento de enumerar los párrafos. Y en el preámbulo, por ejemplo, encontré que hay 12 y quizás algunos están repetidos. Y entonces, por eso mi pregunta, si vamos párrafo por párrafo, estaríamos revisando, mientras que si pudiéramos hacer una observación, que por ejemplo yo siento que el párrafo, algunos podrían suprimirse, el 8 podría ser el número 2, el 9, el número así, no sé, creo que la metodología, ir párrafo, es solo una pregunta. Y luego,
Sí, cuando lleguemos al párrafo, puedes sugerir eliminarlo.
aquí, muchas gracias.
Sí. This is very important. That's why I said we are trying to reduce this, and you heard it. So when we get to specific paragraph that you consider we can delete, please suggest to delete.
Or take out.
Or take out piece of the paragraph and ask to merge maybe with another piece in another paragraph. Ulay?
Mena, I have a different suggestion. Reading through this, it's all critical, but let's do purpose to function. So send this paper as it is to the president so he provides a response to it. But for the purpose of governing council, we are confined with time. I think there's enough talent around the room to distill a document just for that purpose.
We have to approve it by 12:30 today because
I see.
the draft have been circulated. So don't worry, we are not going to change the aspects that are in the draft. They will respond to the draft. But we have to approve it by 12:30. What we can decide is when Tunda reads it with the governing council, we can suggest not reading some of the paragraphs, especially in the preamble, to make it shorter. Okay, paragraphs 1. Do you have an observation there, Tadesse?
The observation is what we have on the title of the paper is already copied for the second time on the beginning of the paragraph. So it's good to remove the paragraph, I suggest.
So we remove the first paragraph because it repeats
The first part of the sentence, they put the paragraph.
the first part.
Mm.
And we start was held in Rome.
Until
The meeting.
until 20.
The
20.
meeting was held.
Yeah.
Okay, the 6th global meeting was held in Rome.
On 9, 10, 13,
Yeah.
23. So all that is already on the top.
Okay,
So it's obvious. And
any other observation on this paragraph, Joseph?
Not on that one. I think the first
Okay,
one.
so let's move to the next one. If there's no other observation on the first one, we go to the second. The
Yeah.
extensive dialogue around the theme of the forum, the name of the team, and generated key recommendations summarized herein. Do we have observation on this one?
We are repeating the theme again, so we might just,
Delete.
yeah, and mention something about extensive dialogue, generated recommendations.
Okay. Darío? No, no hay sugerencias. Do you have? No. Okay, so we have a first paragraph that can be merged into one paragraph. Okay, do we agree with that? Okay, let's move to the preamble. First paragraph of the preamble. Can we put numbers just to make it much easier? Yes, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, Hanya.
Hanya.
I suggest to put after the creative, we put independent of the obstructing policies.
The threats of climate change require bold and creative solutions.
A creative and independent of the obstructing policies.
We're making it longer.
Yeah.
Sorry.
My suggestion was to eliminate that paragraph, delete
Yeah.
the paragraph.
Yeah.
Because we are saying things that other people are saying, that we need creative solution, we need to change. I think we do not need to say anything there. Yes.
Please delete.
Mhm. Is there another? Yes. Do we agree to delete the number 1?
Yes, I would agree to delete.
Okay. So we delete
Number
number
3.
1. Okay, so the new number 1. We indigenous peoples are among those who are particularly affected by the impacts. Any observation on that? Yes, Pratima?
So can we diversify who we are based on the UN declarations, Article 21 and 22? Because we clearly wanted to highlight indigenous persons with disabilities, including elderly, children, youth, and women over here.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you.
Where in
Yeah.
this?
When we say we,
Burden
We,
on
Um,
women,
okay.
persons with disabilities, elderly.
youth,
Okay.
women.
Okay. My suggestion there was tensions and conflicts with neighbors, just delete
Yeah.
with neighbors, just say tensions and conflicts, because it can be with neighbors, but it can be far away. Any, not only with neighbors. Any other, any other suggestion?
It's in the end of that paragraph, which is now paragraph 1, where we have increased burden on women. Basically, I'm suggesting we add children, so women and children.
Okay, so we have, because we just added youth.
Yeah.
Women, children, youth, persons with disabilities, elderly. Devashi?
Just suggestion as to form, if we add the different disadvantaged groups, then make that a clear sentence that put a full stop instead of which, then say these or aforesaid thing lead to, but not to keep this formulation of which with the full colon. It becomes too long a sentence.
No, where we say these effects make a second? At the middle part?
I am saying that, as the current formulation, we have a which, and with a full colon, and that's said to lead to disruptions, this, that, with all the semicolons, yeah?
Okay.
So put a full stop after that. Affected by impacts of climate change, include all their different disadvantaged groups, put a full stop, and then say, these lead to disruptions in a new sentence.
Okay. Okay, any other observation? Yes. Adelante.
Gracias. En el resto del documento se va a utilizar posteriormente sistemas de vida. En este párrafo sugiero que se agrega, dice que provocan alteraciones a nuestros sistemas de vida, porque se vuelve congruente con lo que va a venir después en el documento.
No basta con decir disruptions to other livelihood activities. Porque livelihoods, ¿cómo lo tienen traducido? Sí. So he is suggesting these lead to disruptions to, ¿cómo se dice eso en inglés? Valeria? He wants to say sistemas de vida. Livelihoods. Yo creo que livelihoods es eso, sí, es mucho más amplio. Creo que lo incluye. En la traducción tal vez no quedó bien, pero en inglés sí. Ok. Ok. Allá al fondo. Yes, can you? I don't have
Sí,
names.
estaba viendo en la parte de conflictos, sobre los conflictos, las tensiones y los conflictos. No sé si sea necesario que se enfatice de que los conflictos están aumentando a nivel local, territorial, ¿no?
Pero dice
Justamente,
incremento de tensiones y conflictos.
ajá, a nivel
Mejor
local
lo
o
dejamos
territorial.
general, sí.
Ujú.
Porque después hay otros por eso párrafos.
Ok.
Okay, so Diana, en esta.
Es solamente una sugerencia. Empezamos diciendo nosotros, los pueblos indígenas, estamos. Entonces, yo sugiero que se pueda quitar nosotros e iniciar los pueblos indígenas estamos porque está como un poco redundante. Ya,
Okay.
gracias.
Muchas gracias. Okay, can we see the version? Sí. Okay. Number 2. Observations number 2. Likewise, we are also victims of some climate actions, such as large renewable energy projects, and it ends with food security. The paragraph. Any observation?
Sí.
My suggestion in there was to delete from these imposed solutions undermine our climate leadership, because we have other paragraphs that refer to undermining of climate leadership. the second part.
Agree.
Any other observation? Yes, Anya.
When it comes to climate actions, I think it doesn't make sense when we put mining.
Such as large renewable energy projects and the mining of energy yeah.
No, they are now going to mine transition minerals for renewable energy. So that's lithium, cobalt, all of this to justify the just transition. So it's going to be a big problem for indigenous peoples related to climate solutions. So this is a very clear threat in many countries, the mining to support renewable energy and the just transition to climate change. So it really undermines our climate leadership.
So can we just justify it? What you mentioned, we can justify it. What we are going through.
Sí. Es que en realidad no son acciones, son medidas. Entonces, que quizás el texto, podríamos decir, son víctimas de medidas, no de acciones, sino de medidas, y quizás quitemos la palabra climáticas y vayamos directo. Medidas como la ampliación de la minería para proyectos de energías renovables, la ampliación de la frontera agrícola para proyectos de monocultivos, ir directos a dos ejemplos concretos y eliminar el resto. Yo estaría de acuerdo con eso.
John?
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Sorry, can I add something? Because here you are mentioned this specific mining related to the alternative energy. I think all types of mining affected the indigenous people, such like in our country, the golding mining. It is affected our people in different areas. Even it is affected the protected area related. So that I think mining as the words, it is enough more than to specify types of mining.
Yeah, but it's related with climate.
We're facing a challenge for the golding mining in the protected area. So it is actually affected the indigenous people and climate change, because it is degradation of the forest and destroying of all the habitat surrounding the area of mining.
Can we say some climate measures and the mining of energy transition mineral and other minerals?
Yes, and also the drilling, oil drill. We have in biosphere area in mangroves at Red Sea. There is processing of oil drill. It is also affected the indigenous people and local communities surrounding this area. And actually it is affected the mangroves forest, so that I think it is, if we can put the mining and oil drills and any of developing programs, it is affected actually the climate change and the indigenous people as themselves.
When we mentioned earlier in the first one, we said all ecosystems. So that, yes, and ecosystems that are affected by the impact. The Devashish?
This is with regard to the paragraph raised by Hanie, and I was wondering whether instead of first say some climate change actions such as blah, 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 large renewable energy projects and mining, one, to make it clear that these are happening under the rubric, under the title of climate action. Two, that they are therefore inherently contradictory to climate change. And third, to say that they should be ceased henceforth. So if I would go about like this, likewise, we are also victims of large renewable energy, blah, 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 which are violation of our rights. Continue. Next sentence, continue. Food security. These should not be termed as climate action because they are inherently contradictory to the principles and whatever language comes in, and they should henceforth be seized. They should be stopped. That would make it clearer that we are talking about actions which are under the title of climate action.
Devashish, it's too long. How can we summarize
I
that?
can give it a try,
Yes.
or anyone can. But
Try.
if you get the principle. Okay.
Yes. You ask the floor over this side. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I believe when we are talking about energy, mining of energy transition, I think it is not only mining that we should include. I think we should also include the waste dumping, because it's not the mining that is hampering us the most. It is the disposal of the waste of the energy mining. So, for example, like a few energy minerals, after usage, whatever the waste is, that is being dumped, that is more dangerous than actually the mining. So mining is dangerous in itself, but the dumping of waste is more dangerous. That directly affects your life, and I think that's more dangerous than the mining itself.
That is already, when we say mining, that's part of it, including the dumping of the mining waste. I think the point here is that we're saying that the climate solutions being offered, the just transition, it's called, right? The just transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy is causing us problems, that is also violating our rights. That's the context of this paragraph, that these so-called solutions is not necessarily recognizing or are even undermining our climate leadership, because it is in violation when they do it in violation to our rights. So I hope, because we're referring to the just transition as a climate solution, which is the shift from fossil fuel to renewable energy to reduce carbon emission. So everybody's talking about renewable energy and the just transition as the solution that everybody should support, right? So that is the context of this. And part of that just transition is, again, building large dams because it's renewable, but also mining for the lithium and other minerals that will be used for electric cars or batteries. And that is taking place in the lands of indigenous people. So I just wish to explain the context of this para. Now, if there are other things, because we're talking of the climate leadership, the climate issues, no. So, but if there are other concerns, then maybe we can add them in other parts so that we're not getting mixed up of what the key message is in this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. We are going to a coffee break. I hope the Devashish can come up with a paragraph that summarizes all of this discussion, understanding that we're talking about the transition, the just transition. It's not about all of the impact of everything impacting indigenous peoples. That's why you have to go to the other paragraphs and say, identify where. So we go to coffee break. Devashish prepare a version of that 2nd. Remember, we have 10 more before we go into recommendations. So please, let's try to reduce our expectations of a document that includes all of our problems. Okay, thank you. We go to coffee break. And we come back and read the version that the Vashes will prepare with Valeria. Thank you. So thank you for coming back from your coffee break. We will continue the synthesis of deliberation discussion, but we will change what we're doing. Since we only have 1 hour, we will begin with the recommendations. And after we agree on the recommendations, we will come back to the preamble. So my first recommendation on the recommendations is to reorganize and begin the recommendations for IFAD with the recommendations on policy, then the recommendations on the forum process, and then the recommendations to the countries. And then we move to Indigenous Peoples Climate Leadership, and then we go to the recommendations to governments and to Indigenous peoples. So we will discuss them in that order. So can we put, so the recommendations on IFAD policies on engagement with Indigenous peoples, number 1 is the one on your paper is the number 9. So if you made notes to the number 9, this is the time to bring your inputs. Do you have any observation under this point? Allocate adequate financial and human resources to fully implement the updated IFAD policy on engagement with Indigenous peoples. This includes the recruitment of dedicated staff at all levels, including a lead technical specialist, the translation and publication of the policy in Indigenous languages, awareness raising and capacity building of Indigenous peoples, government and IFAD staff, and the development of monitoring tools. Any observation? No observation. Thank you. We move to the recommendation number 2. Develop guidelines. In your document is the number 10. Go back to your number 10 to see if you made notes. No, it's the number 2. Develop guidelines and protocols for the meaningful participation of the members of the steering committee of the Indigenous Peoples Forum at IFAD as observers at the executive board of IFAD. Any observation? No observation. Thank you. We move to the number 3. The number 3 is your number 4 in your document. It's under Indigenous Peoples Forum Process and Dialogue. Delete with Indigenous peoples. Number 4, enhance communication, dialogue, and information sharing with Indigenous peoples, including the participants in the Indigenous Peoples Forum, especially at national level. This includes through the organizations of quarterly meetings, the establishment of country coordination groups, and the identification of focal points at the level of both IFAD country teams and IFAD Indigenous Peoples Organization. Any observation on recommendation number three? Joseph, you have the floor.
Well, yes, thank you. Under that, and allowed me with your permission also to bring something up. I just came in when we already done that particular paragraph. Under number 4, I think we need to bring on this particular point about the role of IFAD at the regional level. So we don't only focus on the country, but because the way IFAD has organized itself, it is important we also acknowledge the regional entities at IFAD. So as we engage at the national level, we also engage at the regional level. Country, and yeah. The second, which I missed, and I wanted to bring a third, is if you look paragraph or bullet number 2, where we are talking about participation of indigenous consultants. I think the word participation is a big. The word participation need to be okay. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
So we are now in the document that you have reviewing the number 4 of your document. That is now the number 3. So there we would include especially at regional and national level. Perfect. Any other observation? No more observation. Approve number 3. Now we move to number 4. That in your document is number 5. Number 5. Ensure that recommendations from the forum are integrated and reflected in the regional action plans to be agreed upon with IFAD regional divisions. Do we want to use the word reflected or only integrated? Is it necessary to use both words? Any observation of this number 5? No observation. Yes, please.
I think the observation observed is that what is in number 3 that has to do with national and regional should also be reflected in here, because I've seen regional, so we can say national and regional actions. I mean, because what comes from these different national and regional meetings can be reflected and can have some results.
That we make is with the regional directors. So it's regional action plans, although it includes national activities. Ilaria, does this change anything? Can yeah, we do not agree national action plans. We only agree regional action plans that include activities at national levels, but they are integrated into a regional action plan. So even if we put national, it would be reiterativo. Someone asked for the word, someone wanted to speak over this side. Sonia?
Sí, en ese cuando habla del foro que se integre y se quitó reflejen porque no puede ser aplicar. Ese término de aplicar porque eso ese tiene un procedimiento bastante adecuado y se tiene para un fin también. Gracias.
Perfecto. Any other observation? If not, we approve recommendation number 4. Now we go to recommendation number 5. Recommendation number 5 is your recommendation in your document number 1. IFAD country programs. So if you have observation, is the one that say ensure the meaningful participation of indigenous peoples in the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of IFAD strategies, projects, and programs at all levels in order to 1, 2, and 3. Yes?
Again, I'm insisting on to have independent participation. It also reflects to the right of self-determination, which we have it in all the documents which are related to indigenous people. Meaningful and independent. Thank you.
Perfect, yes.
So here participation, like with like I think do we have the degree of involvement? Like what exactly it is, in what capacity? So like it is participation as observer, as what, or like it's involvement, complete involvement of the indigenous people. So like participation can be changed to maybe involvement.
Yes, because it says meaningful participation, and it says in design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of IFAD strategies, projects, and programs. It is saying how at all levels. So it's already saying how the participation is. Any other yes? Over there, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I know women has been mentioned, but I just wanted to flag and include women here and the youth as well, because unless they participate in the whole process, they will not be included, no? And at the national level, this is also important because they cannot participate just as project beneficiaries. So I was maybe add in the letter I, align them to our needs, priorities, and aspirations, noting gender and intergenerational specificities. Well, a better language will be welcome.
And Pratima?
Yeah, I was just willing to add the same thing over here, because ensure the meaningful diverse, when we write diverse, I think that will integrate other groups also. And we really want to put here also about the respective indigenous peoples organizations. Otherwise, as a person with disabilities, it becomes very much difficult for us to be engaged in this meaningful process. Thank you.
no needs, priorities, and aspirations, noting gender, intergenerational balance, and indigenous persons with disability. And persons with disability.
Disability, if it is gender, intergenerational, then you can add disability.
And disability.
Okay.
Can we say social inclusion? It is more.
No. The social inclusion word is very much ambiguously worded by the different UN agencies, and we have a reservation on that at the national level, basically.
Discovered.
The changes on this paragraph would be ensure the meaningful and independent participation, and after one, align them to our needs, priorities, and aspirations, noting gender, intergenerational, disabilities, and disabilities. Yeah, and you take it, yeah.
Can we think about the emergency disaster risk reduction?
Yeah, we would have to find somewhere.
Yeah.
Just keep it in mind and let's find a place to put it. Okay, so we agree on this. Number 2 in your document. Joseph, you had recommendation here. Number 6, provide the necessary information and capacity building to enable indigenous peoples to effectively engage in strategies and in the design, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation of projects and programs, and ensure the participation of indigenous consultants in these processes. It can be written in a more.
Can you add information and resources?
Yes, so we will, after necessary information and resources. So take off the and. No, yeah. And the other and. Implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. Take off the and after monitoring. Any other observation to this number 6?
Yeah, well, my little intervention here is the word ensure participation of indigenous consultant. I think the word ensure participation. Well, I want to probably add to say that ensure indigenous consultant, participation by hiring them, not just participation, but by hiring. So there's a kind of a serious commitment rather than just participation. So we make it a bit more action oriented. Thank you. Yeah, I agree, but I'm bringing both together. Yeah.
Okay, yes, Palab.
Regarding the suppose provide the necessary information resources. So if those resources are translated in indigenous friendly languages, how can we bring that issue? Information resources or
saying provide the necessary information resources. We have already include resources.
That's why resources not in English but in indigenous languages, that I mean, so that they can effectively engage in the consultation.
It's in another item, the translation.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Merci, maman, pour la parole. Je m'excuse parce que je rentre un tout petit peu sur le 5e, qui est le point 1 ici. Je vois qu'il y a un élément qui manque. C'est là où nous parlons du point 2, petit 2, d'intégrer nos valeurs, nos régimes fonciers, nos systèmes de gouvernance et des savoirs. C'est un peu vague, les savoirs. Si nous pouvons être un peu plus spécifiques, parce qu'il y a beaucoup de savoirs. Alors là, ça nous concerne. C'est donc le savoir endogène ou ancestral que nous pouvons spécifier beaucoup mieux. Merci.
Please, can you tell me the language you would like? Because it says, that's the other one, the one that we already approved. Because it says integrate in the number 5, integrate our values, land tenure, governance, and knowledge systems. We already approved that. Yes, Vital?
En fait, je comprends aisément ce que les inquiétudes de Domassel, c'est à cause de la traduction. Parce que la traduction en français, vraiment, on voit qu'il y a un peu de manquement par rapport au texte original en anglais. Donc, c'est pourquoi même il est difficile pour nous francophones de suivre. C'est-à-dire que quand on va avoir la version finale en anglais, il faut qu'on traduit pour qu'on puisse avoir un document vraiment qui reflète le même document en français, en anglais et en espagnol. Merci.
Okay. Thank you for understanding that. So we approve the number 6, including information, resources, evaluation of strategies, projects and programs, and ensure the involvement and hiring of indigenous consultants in these processes. Okay, number 7. The number 7 is your number 3, the number 3 in your document. IFAD country teams to actively engage and collaborate with other UN agencies to strengthen complementarity and enhance synergies in supporting the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. But we should relate it with IFAD's policy. And implement the policy.
Yeah.
And implement the updated policy, something like that. So it's not only the UN DRIP, but the policy to link it with IFAD's mandate. Any other observation? Yes?
Is it okay to replace policy with regulations, because regulations is involved both policies and law?
And it's the policy.
Not a law.
IFAD's policy on engagement with indigenous peoples.
That's how it's called.
That's the name of the document.
Because it's not a law.
¿Sí?
Gracias. Tengo una sugerencia, pero también es duda porque depende del idioma. La palabra complementariedad. No sé si es mejor hablar de concurrencia de las políticas.
Cambio de reacción.
Cambiar la palabra complementariedad por concurrencia.
¿Dónde está la palabra? Strengthening complementarity and enhance synergy. ¿Por qué palabra?
Concurrencia.
Concurrencia en English.
Convergence. Yeah, it's the same as complementation.
Okay.
A complementarity.
Perfect.
Gracias.
Okay. And we delete the IFAD policy? Should we?
No, it's okay now.
It's okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Convergence is the same thing, no?
No. Convergence is you mix and they are independent.
Mejor se complementan que convergen porque todos
Yeah.
tienen mandatos diferentes.
Yeah.
Son las distintas
Complement,
agencias.
Yes. Yes. It's More collaborative.
O sea, cada uno tiene sus propios mandatos.
Yeah.
Entonces la idea es que se complementen manteniendo sus áreas de mandato. Sí. Se articulen y se complementen. Okay. So we agree with that. So let's move now to the leadership. Your number 6. We are now in the number 6 in your document. Enhance IFAD's leadership role in its engagement with indigenous peoples too. A, B, C, and D. Yes, Mane?
Thank you, Mira. Actually, I would like to go back because I raised my hand, but you could not see. So I just would like to agree that we should put up the policy of IFAD, but also I think maybe the IFAD country team actively engage with the other EU agencies, not only the implementation of the UN DRIP and the IFAD policy, but the other commitment from the UN, you know, because I see a lot of commitment that have been done at the international level, but could not reach out to the country level. So I would suggest to put like the other commitment from the UN as well.
Recommendation to IFAD.
Yes.
Not to the others.
Yes.
So what we are inviting IFAD is that they coordinate at country level. But we cannot recommend IFAD to force the other agencies to fulfill their mandate. All we can recommend is that they complement to really implement the UN DRIP. And of course, to invite the others to help them implement their policy. Okay, any observation under number 6?
Yeah.
Can we add
Yes.
grievance and redress? Because here is this we concern issue of the free, prior, and informed consent. What's about the compensation if it is something happened or it is not okay for the indigenous people? So we should concern the grievance issue.
Yeah, okay, and to yeah, and provide effective grievance mechanism.
Yes.
After protocol. No.
Yeah.
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 It's okay.
Okay, Joseph?
How do I take this off?
So sorry for that. I'm proposing under number D, we bring diversity before action. So to read indigenous people's climate and biodiversity action at all level. Thank you.
Yes, you
okay.
have, yes.
Here. For the number D also, what is the mechanism that can help or support these indigenous people to be as part from participation and the action plan? It is need to specify the mechanism that can be helping or supporting the indigenous people to be involved or participate in this action plan or in action, climate actions at all level. Number D. It's okay.
Thank you. I have 3 comments, one in paragraph A, the other C, and also D. For the paragraph A, I would suggest to add also ABS after FPEG. Whenever it comes to FPEG, it is better to also add ABS, access and benefit sharing. And for the paragraph C, I will explain more on paragraph 7, but please also put agencies for independent indigenous peoples climate leadership. And for paragraph D again, meaningful and independent practice participation of indigenous people.
Been using the self-determination. The term that we use at international level is indigenous peoples self-determination. So we should be how say consistent with the terminology that we use.
Yeah.
So if we begin to bring in different terms, that will open to different interpretations. So I think we should use well-being, or if we want to say indigenous people rights and self-determined development, we can use the term self-determination more than independent, because that can create other type of interpretations.
May I just to refer to what you have said. We have the term of self-determination in UNDRIP, but it is due to the governments themselves, not, the indigenous people's government, not due to the other government. But when it comes to IFAD, because of the strategy of IFAD goes to getting the fund and the participation through other governments rather than the government of indigenous peoples themselves, the term of self-determination cannot make any sense in this regard. When I talk about independent participation, it means to have another mechanism, maybe to improve the mechanism of IFAD, to have independent participation of indigenous peoples themselves.
We have the policy already approved the term self-determination. IFAD's policy for engagement with indigenous peoples includes the recognition of self-determination. So, yes, Palab?
For B, foster dialogue and cooperation between indigenous peoples. So in this here, I propose indigenous peoples organizations and traditional institutions. To specify, sometimes indigenous peoples traditional institutions is crucial, so that if we mention here, so they will not be excluded. Thank you.
Sí, en la letra A sugerimos ya al final, en donde dice no existen protocolos, ahí adicionar con el fin de garantizar los derechos de la madre tierra. Gracias.
Sí, igual en el inciso A, me parece fundamental en la parte donde dice protocolos también agregar, adicionando o considerando un presupuesto especializado para garantizar el derecho al consentimiento libre, previo e informado. Porque los proyectos del FIDA pues es la ejecución nada más, pero necesitamos garantizar si el FIDA implementa este tipo de proyectos de desarrollo.
Pero ya pusimos en el anterior que se refería a los países que se asignen recursos. Sí, entonces sería repetitivo. Yes.
Number B, foster dialogue and cooperation between indigenous people and governments. What is the mechanism for this dialogue should be emerged or to be happen? It is through the platform or through the annual meeting, or should be here specify the types of the dialogue that could be fostered by the IFAD between the indigenous people and local and governments. It is to establish the platform at local, at national level that
remember that we have already approved one that established quarterly meetings.
Yeah. Yeah.
At national and country level. So it already established. Okay, so if we do not have any more new observation, can we approve number 6?
No,
I'm sorry, number 8. Yeah,
No,
John?
I have a reservation on the right of Mother Earth. And I'm not sure also if it's properly located there, because what the key message of that point is for IFAD to respect and protect the rights of indigenous peoples and well promote it to government. That's the key message. So yeah, and not for Mother Earth. So I don't know if we want to put that in another item, but I just have problems with the right to Mother Earth.
¿Estarían de acuerdo en sacarlo de esto y tratar de ubicarlo en otro lado? Cuando veamos el preámbulo. Sí, en el preámbulo puede ir. Okay. No other, yes?
Yes, can we add it here, regarding the capacity of the indigenous people and local communities regarding the issue of disaster risk management or emergency, because here it is all to respect their protection and rights and so on and so on, and how when it is happening, such like disasters.
No, we will continue finding a space for the disaster risk. It may be in the preamble, and so we will look somewhere to include that. We take note of that, but it should not be here. Yeah, because we are combining too many things in the paragraph. So I would urge you to agree that we approve this. Tunda, you have something new for this paragraph?
Yeah, I thinking loud about where we can put Mother Earth on the first, that very first point where we had put it. Maybe it can come in the beginning where we're saying promote and respect for the protection of indigenous people's right and territories. Then we are capturing the aspect of where we are living.
We will get back to the preamble.
Okay.
Okay, so we approve number 8. Okay, let's move to number 9. You have another observation, Mane, for number 8?
Yes, very short. It's can you go back to the number 8? Number 8.
Observation.
On the screen, this number 9.
Yeah.
Please go back to the number 8. I just would like to add up point B, foster meaningful dialogue. Actually, we experience the dialogue, but it's not that meaningful. So, yeah, thank you.
Perfect. So you can look at the paragraph and we all agree with it. We can sleep with it. Okay, let's move to number 9. Number 9 is your previous number 7. Invest in building the capacities of indigenous peoples, including to access climate finance. Maybe we can include and to design and manage projects and programs. As concrete measures, develop an internship, facilitate interlearning exchange. So maybe my recommendation on this is to invest in the capacities, including to access climate finance, disaster, something referring to disaster risk.
And response.
And response, yes.
Mechanisms.
This disaster risk and response mechanisms, and to manage projects and programs. Would you agree, sister, that we include it here?
Yes, and can we add something another, such like knowledge management issue? Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry to raising this issue so many times. As I am very new to this platform, and just why I am asking, raising this issue very much. IFAD, please correct me if I am wrong. IFAD asked and invited us for help to improve its policies. We are not only strengthening the existing policies of IFAD now, because they exist right now. We are here to help together to improve IFAD policies. I understand that when I talk about independency, your mind quickly goes to self-determination. The reason for this to come to mind is that the atmosphere of West Asia is often unfamiliar to many of us. Let me make this serious suggestion here, that independent mechanism, I am insisting to have an independent mechanism in Iran, in IFAD, that needs to be established in IFAD so that financial aid can help the indigenous people in the direction of beneficial climate change measure, regardless of the hindering policies considerations. You are aware that I am talking about sanctions, but we shouldn't put the sanctions in the draft. Maybe it is not good to have it, but maybe we can just you can just help West Asian people to be.
We can try to find a way, but the mechanism that is in place for indigenous peoples is this forum. It's already established. We already have, this is our 6th meeting, and it's not an event in itself because we have regional participation. We have action plans that we work and develop in each forum, and we monitor between forum. So there is a mechanism, and it's independent. So it already exists. So it may have to improve. It may have to do better work in the future, but it already exists. So we cannot go until IFAD create something else because this already exists. We cannot go and say, we are not working, so create something new. This is the independent forum. Yeah, so can we move to the number 10? Can we agree on number 9? We only have 20 minutes and we have to go into the.
Agree. Can I please, on number 9, can I please make one concrete example here? Because I see 2 words here you use. Develop an internship programs. Are you hearing me? Are you hearing me now? Okay, there's a word here, develop an internship program. And then another word that says facilitate inter-learning exchange. These are not specific word. It doesn't link to something. You know, internship, we all know is general. When you say internship, you're making reference to maybe capacity. So can we be specific to what kind of internship you're referring to in parentheses? And learning exchange, what is it interlearning exchange is talking about? So the indigenous people will know that at least at certain time they will know exactly what they are talking about. So I just thought to bring it out.
Internship means that maybe you can go and spend a month in IFAD office in your country and get to know how they work. That is the internship. And exchange, maybe the sister from IPAF project in Africa can meet with the one in Latin America and they can learn about. So it's very specific. Okay. So if you have another concrete way on how to develop capacity, that can be included. But these two are very specific and came out from all of your recommendations in the regional consultations. So Esperanza, you have something?
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup pour la parole. Moi, en revenant sur l'introduction de cette recommandation, je vois que la recommandation veut renforcer les capacités des peuples autochtones dans l'accès au financement climatique pour gérer les projets et pour bien les élaborer. Mais quand on va maintenant dans le détail ici, c'est un tout petit peu, bon, pas vraiment à l'écart, mais ça ne rencontre pas l'introduction concrètement. Alors, pour compléter ces deux points qui ont déjà été mentionnés, je propose ou je proposerai que on y ajoute un troisième point. Et ce troisième point devrait rentrer sur la recommandation que j'ai entendu ressortir dans toutes les régions sur la dotation ou l'ouverture d'une fenêtre de financement direct aux peuples autochtones pour gérer les projets sur le climat et la préservation de la biodiversité. Donc, je pense, en énumérant les sous-points, on devrait avoir un troisième point, un troisième sous-point qui reprend cela, parce que ça renforce effectivement la capacité et sur le plan technique et sur le plan de gestion. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Esperanza. We have IPAF. IPAF is the facility. It's the fund that is in IFAD to support indigenous peoples. And so it already exists. And there's a recommendation to strengthen IPAF. So we can add maybe a stronger language under that recommendation. Mane?
Yes, in the number 9, I would like to add the sentence including to access climate finance with appropriate cultural appropriate, and the other point, develop an internship and fellowship program. Can put, yeah, and.
Merci. Moi, ce que dans le point 9 là, ce que je voudrais, c'est là où on parle des fellowship programs for indigenous leaders. Pour moi, je trouve que leader, c'est trop limité. C'est mieux qu'on ouvre, si ça essaie de mettre un programme pour les jeunes autochtones et les femmes, afin qu'ils puissent comprendre aussi, bien connaître aussi les mécanismes qui soutient les droits des populations autochtones tels que IPAF ou FIDA.
Prioritizing women and youth. Okay. Okay, yes. Okay, so with that, I'm sorry, we move to number 10. Increase direct support. That has to do with what you're saying, Esperanza. Increase direct support to the initiatives of indigenous peoples with a focus on women and youth in climate leadership and resilience, including through the IPAF. So the two recommendations that you made now are in this recommendation. Yeah. So with that, we cover your two recommendations. Any observation under number 10? That was your previous number 8. No recommendation?
No, I think women and youth, it is here, it is a very, and it's specified and neglect the others, such like disabled and girl. So if it is in larger sentence, to add it the girl and disabled, it's more.
Yeah. Okay, so we approve number 10. Let's move to number 11. No, 11 is the number 1 for governments. No, we move to recommendations for governments. For governments, number 1, develop policies. It's your previous number 1 for government. No is number 11. Develop policies that protect and advance the rights of indigenous peoples and ensure their effective implementation in coordination with our communities and organizations, and by ensuring free, prior and informed consent and alignment with the UN DRIP. In particular, recognize and protect the integrity of indigenous territories of life and support the development and implementation of planes de vida, or we can say self-determined development plans, with the necessary technical, financial, and institutional resources. Observations, Devashis? Development, self-determined development.
Just a suggestion to add the word peoples before communities in the second line.
Thank you. I'm proposing to add the following words: develop legislation, comma, policies and programs. Thank you.
Any other recommendation? Yes, Mane?
I think regarding to the ensuring free, prior, informed consent and alignment with the UN DRIP, I think should mention also alignment with the IFAD policy, because this is going to be IFAD project funded partner, the government, right? So if so, I think it should be also aligned with the IFAD policy engagement with indigenous people.
Oui, moi je pense que en ce qui concerne en coordination avec nos organisations, avec nos communautés plutôt et organisations, moi je proposerais en coordination avec les organisations. Yeah.
Very good. So we approve number 11. No more observation. Número 11. Darío. Vamos al número 2 del gobierno. ¿O no? ¿Podrías decirlo ahorita?
No, lo que estaba pensando es que esta recomendación va dirigida a los gobiernos en relación con FIDA. Y lo que hacen los gobiernos es aprobar las políticas de FIDA y tener políticas específicas de cada país conjuntamente con FIDA. Entonces yo pensaría que la recomendación a los gobiernos es que incluyan en las políticas concretas que desarrollan conjuntamente entre cada gobierno con FIDA, la Declaración de Naciones Unidas sobre Derechos de los Pueblos Indígenas.
Perfecto. Okay. Se hizo. Ya está, porque dice, dice la declaración para operacionalizar la política de IFAD.
Okay.
Se agregó, ya. Bueno, okay, we move to number 12. That is your previous number 2 under governments. Recognize indigenous people's contribution to climate action and biodiversity conservation and develop programs, policies, and adequate resources and financing mechanisms that support our climate leadership, with special attention to women and youth. This includes direct financing. Any, yes?
Here I would want, thank you. Here I would want a word added, maybe before develop, and then after that, autonomous programs, policies. So it's like autonomy should be there in that. Autonomy that should be governed by the indigenous peoples.
Yeah, I think and develop, because you're addressing what's this governments. It's not for them to develop autonomous program for indigenous peoples, but rather to respect self-determined, let's put self-determined development plans of indigenous peoples, if that is what you meant.
Oh, yes, because
Yeah.
Your mic, yes.
The point before where we talked, we said that we should have effective implementation with people. What happens is, if it is, there is no autonomy. So what we are saying is, it's okay, they give, but because traditional knowledge system has to be there when there is an autonomy. If there is an interference, I think we will, it will be misled. So that is where I'm saying autonomous.
Why it says that's one to government. So we are asking them to respect our self-determined development plans, or that means our own. That means our autonomous. That's what it means when we say self-determined development plans.
Can we say recognize and develop, support self-determined development programs and support indigenous peoples for and support us for the development of self-determined development programs, policies, and adequate resources. So we are using the same thing that you're saying, but we are using a term that is already established.
I agree to what you're saying. Point is, we should not give an opportunity to interpret by somebody else. So if there is somewhere it is mentioned that this means this, maybe that will be helpful, because government will in that case be free to interpret it as per their requirements. So that is the only challenge that I see.
I think your issue is very clearly addressed here, because that means it's our self-determined development program that they need to support, and they don't impose their own. That's clear.
Okay. Do we have something else to add under this number 12?
Yeah.
Is it something new, Mane? Yes.
Yes. I would like to suggest to recognize the indigenous people right to land and territory in contribution to the climate action. Yeah.
Sorry. Knowledge system. If you leave out knowledge.
Yo quería
Okay.
poner
One more over there, and then Darío and Joseph.
This is for the government, so I just want to clearly outline person with disabilities over there.
Where do you want it?
After the
With
youth.
special attention to women.
After the youth, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then
Can we add the words recognize indigenous peoples and their cultural and rituals contribution. Cultural and rituals contribution to the climate change.
Yo quiero proponer una.
Yeah, we are putting a lot of things in this paragraph.
Yeah, we know we have a problem with governance, but
Darío?
Sí, de hecho quiero proponer una redacción diferente. Como la recomendación es para los gobiernos, quisiera iniciar que ellos implementen los derechos de los pueblos indígenas como una manera de reconocer las contribuciones de los pueblos indígenas frente al cambio climático. Y esto aseguraría que muchas cosas del párrafo puedan cortarse.
Vamos a ver cómo lo arreglamos porque el párrafo anterior ya dice protección y avance de derechos.
Sí.
Sí, para no repetir. Joseph?
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure really whether what I wanted to say has been captured, but under number 2, we are asking, government to develop programs and policies in indigenous people territories, particularly programs. One way to address the fears and concerns is to probably brought in the principle of the UN declaration so that the statement read develop programs in line with the principle of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Thank you.
If we continue adding the number 2, we will have to delete because we already have the declaration in the number 1. We already have the protection of resources in the number 1, of rights in the number 1.
Well, yeah. I entirely agree, but we need to have a line that protects indigenous people. So that element is not going to be abused by governments. If we leave it open entirely, government can develop anything, and then we become victims of what they have already developed. So we have to be absolutely conscious on what we're asking the government to do, but then protect, put a language that do not give them the freedom to do exactly what they want to do. Thank you.
Yeah. Can we start that, rephrase the number 2 and begin with support indigenous people's climate leadership through the, and try to summarize the above. So then we take out recognize indigenous people's contribution to climate action and biodiversity.
But that's the point there.
And then we end with that through to be able to, yeah. And then you say, no, to the support of, through the support for the development of, yeah. Yeah. Okay, number 13. Ensure the full, the previous, you still?
Anyway, yeah.
It's still not. Okay. Support indigenous people's climate leadership through programs, policies, and adequate resources. Through programs, policies, adequate resources, and financing mechanisms. You take out the deployment, yeah. Through programs, policies, take out and adequate resources and financing mechanisms that support our self-determined development. Take out programs with special attention to women, youth, and persons with disability. Yeah, take out this include direct finance. Because it follows the one above that calls for the development of legislation, policies, and programs that protect and advance the rights. And it mentioned UN DRIP for the implementation of the policy. So it goes right, and then so the second one is only to support. We don't have to repeat for the protection of rights. Okay, the number 3, ensure the full and effective participation of indigenous peoples, including women, youth, and persons with disability in discussions, decision-making, and planning processes, including those related to climate and conservation actions at all levels. Any observation? No observation, we approve number 3. Now let's look at the commitments of indigenous peoples. Number 1, continue to protect and enhance the health and integrity of our lands through sustainable natural resources management practices. Lands, territories, and resources. We have used consistently land, territories, and resources. ¿Se sienten contentos aquí o quieren ponerlo de la madre tierra? ¿O con land, territories, and resources basta? Okay, no observation, we go to number 2. Revitalize and continue to develop and transmit indigenous values, knowledge, and practices. Let's put indigenous peoples' values, knowledge, yeah. Remember, everybody say, all of us are indigenous in the world. Knowledge and practices including our forms of government and decision-making as key institutions. Okay, any observation? Sí, land, territories, and resources. No observation on number 2. Number 3. Continue to advocate for indigenous people's rights and well-being and meaningful participation in decision-making processes and debates related to climate change and biodiversity conservation at all levels. Any recommendation, observation? No. Approve. Okay, the Vashis.
I am not clear what is the meaning of debates. Do we mean discussions or deliberations, etc.? Or yeah, debate sounds very negative.
Can I add meaningful, diverse? Can we add word diverse?
No, yo tengo es una consulta sobre la parte general, porque dice compromiso de los pueblos indígenas y en el resto del texto está muy delimitado a los asuntos de FIDA. Quisiera preguntar si aparte no se trata de compromiso del foro de pueblos indígenas de FIDA. Entonces es un poco mi inquietud para poder aportar.
We're not saying anything. What will we continue to advocate for indigenous people's rights and well-being and meaningful diverse participation in IFAD's decision-making processes? Put in IFAD. Because it's not it's for the work that we're doing with IFAD. Okay. Any other observation? Okay. Yes?
Merci pour la parole. Moi, pour les autochtones, ce que je dirais, c'est le mécanisme IPAF. Le mécanisme IPAF étant le mécanisme des autochtones, je souhaiterais qu'il y ait vraiment visibilité de ces mécanismes auprès des autochtones dans les pays. Merci.
Say that we as indigenous peoples, we will spread more information about the work that IFAD is doing. Okay, something like that. Can someone help? Yeah. Continue to advocate. Renata.
Yeah, so I wanted to throw a question. Maybe this could be something we could discuss it. It's regarding indigenous people, the encroachment of governments on indigenous lands, that IPA could probably find a way to come in and help to protect them. Is there any way we can twist and we can find a way to get in this in our decision?
Can you write something?
If I wrote something?
Can you write something? Prepare something? Okay, so we approve number 3, including in IFAD. Number 4, continue to build collaboration and solidarity between indigenous peoples in support of our climate leadership, including through the documentation and sharing of our knowledge and experience. Okay.
Can
Yeah.
Can we add advocacy and lobby?
But the first one already say continue to advocate.
He continue to build collaboration. The collaboration is need to be advocacy.
Yeah, but
before.
advocacy is the one before.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one is
and
among
lobby.
ourselves.
Yes.
Collaboration.
Collaboration
Between indigenous peoples.
and lobby towards the issues related to indigenous people themselves to be raised.
Yeah. No, it's repeating what we said at the beginning in the previous one. And then it says, build the capacities of indigenous women and youth and strengthen our their participation in the decision-making process. It repeats. Yeah, it repeats the number 3. On capacities of indigenous women and youth and strengthen their part in decision-making in minds values of strengthening, improve communication with IFAD at all levels. And we should add a number 7 that we will support the replenishment of IFAD, the 13th replenishment of IFAD at IFAD. Joseph?
Yeah, under number 4, where we are talking about documentation, I remember in the regional discussion, we talked about translation of IFAD new updated policy. And I think we can commit ourselves here to do it. So rather than, because we are talking about in very diverse languages, just proposing that when we talked about documentation, it's also where we can also capture about the whole need to do with the translation. Thank you.
Can we say strengthen the engagement and improve communication with IFAD at all levels, including translation of IFAD's policy in different languages, etc. Okay. We are going to stay without interpretation we are ready. Yeah. But here we are collaborating. The Vashes, we will have to, someone will have to help with Spanish or French because we do not have interpretation anymore. So, okay. The Vashes.
Yes, this was just a small preambular paragraph that I was asked to draft. So whenever you're ready, and of course we need help with the interpretation.
Do you have a recommendation for indigenous peoples?
Oui. Ah non, moi je voulais juste ajouter pour les peuples autochtones, parce que je l'ai vu, il a été déjà dit Là a été déjà dit, on travaille directement avec les peuples autochtones, mais je veux bien parce que c'est un énorme problème. Je vous ai déjà donné l'exemple de l'Algérie. On ne travaille pas en collaboration avec le gouvernement. Alors, dans la mesure du possible, de le mettre clairement, le peuple autochtone, Amazigh ou Afrique, vous demande au FIDA de travailler directement avec les peuples autochtones. Merci.
In the case of Algeria, we've seen it, and the indigenous organization of the Amazigh people do not work with the government, so we're asking the government to work with indigenous organizations.
In the number 10, it says increase direct support to the initiatives of indigenous peoples with a focus on women, girls, persons with disabilities, and youth in climate leadership and resilience, including through the IPAF. So it's there. Any other recommendation for indigenous peoples?
The last
Pratima?
one, I just wanted to write indigenous language and accessible formats.
Any other recommendations? We have approved our recommendations. Can we? Okay, now we go back to the preamble and we will have to work without interpretation. So the number 2 that was focusing on just transition, Devashis has worked on a language. Devashis, can you please share with us?
Thanks, Mina. I'm sorry, I tried to shorten it, but failed. Anyway, I read. Likewise, some climate actions in large renewable energy projects involving energy transition minerals. I have made it italic. Energy transition minerals through mining are being imposed on our territories without our consent and in violation of our rights. These are unwholesome climate actions and do not amount to just transition activities. I have made it italic, and should henceforth be discontinued. I don't know if it means repetition, we can deduct in second line through mining. But it can be old mine minerals and new mine minerals. So it makes sense to also keep the mining. Thank you. I've also emailed you to Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. We will, I suggest that we take out the part of recommendation and we just leave the first part, because when it said should discontinue, we are already making recommendations, and it's the preamble and it's the second paragraph of the preamble. So can we use the first part? Is there any, I'm sorry, por favor, ayuden al español y el francés.
Sí, como quedó la propuesta de Bashis es igualmente algunas acciones climáticas en grandes proyectos de energía renovable que incluyen transiciones energéticas, minerales de la transición energética a través de minería que está siendo impuesta en nuestros territorios sin nuestro consentimiento y en violación de nuestros derechos. Así va quedando.
La proposition d'Eva Chiche pour la deuxième partie du préambule, certaines actions climatiques dans les projets d'énergie renouvelable contiennent, à travers les minéraux pour financer la transition climatique, nous sont imposés sur nos territoires sans notre consentement et en violation de nos droits.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to add, because I've been looking for it in the documents, it's a big issue that it's globally affecting indigenous peoples. I wanted to add, aside from mining, the fortress conservation into the text, like in sure.
Yes, Chair, you're quite right about the recommendations, but then it's somehow then the paragraphs hangs up in the air.
Yeah.
Then if we say something like, after likewise, we are concerned about some climate action, blah, blah, blah. Then at least we express our concern in the preamble.
Okay, we are concerned.
Then we can get rid of the last sentence.
Okay. Okay, we don't have any other observation. Can we move to the other paragraph that said, despite the daunting challenges that we face, we continue to demonstrate resilience and active leadership in different ways, processes, and at all levels, from community-based action to advocacy in national and international arenas, and from practical solution to the knowledge and understanding needed to advance viable visions for the future. Do we maintain that paragraph? Maybe I'll just translate into Spanish. Estamos revisando el párrafo en español que dice, asimismo, a pesar de los tremendos desafíos a los que nos enfrentamos, continuamos demostrando al final de la primera página. Entonces, la pregunta es que si mantenemos ese párrafo o si lo cambiamos. Tunda?
With the interest of like shortening the preamble, I was thinking we can do this because up there we've already mentioned the challenges that indigenous people are facing. And here we are recognizing that despite these challenges, we continue to demonstrate resilience, active leadership in different ways, processes at all levels. I suggest we put a full stop, then because all levels now include all these things that we are mentioning. So I think we don't need to mention these levels. Then we just go next to the next paragraph, paragraph number 5, and look at paragraph number 5 and paragraph 8 actually are correlated, somehow related. So we might agree, looking at number 5 and number 8, we look at how we can merge the two, just condense them.
En español lo que está proponiendo es que este párrafo número 5 se combine con el número 8, porque dejar al principio los que tienen que ver con los impactos y después ya decir a pesar de todo esto y entonces combinarlo con el número 8, juntarlos. El francés.
Ce que Tunda est en train de proposer, c'est de combiner le paragraphe 5 et 8, qui sont similaires sur certains principes, afin de réduire la taille du préambule. et également le paragraphe numéro 9.
The first paragraphs, then paragraphs with impact of climate change, then the paragraph that with solutions, and then the recommendations. That would be the order. Diana?
Ahí en el que era 9, quería hacer una sugerencia en donde dice, igualmente la experiencia indígena señala el importante papel de los jóvenes como futuros líderes. Yo sugiero que no coloquemos como futuros líderes, pues porque ya los jóvenes, hay muchos que ya somos líderes. Entonces pensaría es como el papel de los jóvenes como líderes y agregaría un poco más en donde se diga para un buen relevo generacional. Solo eso. No colocarlo como futuro. Eso. Como líder, como jóvenes líderes, de acuerdo.
But Diana is suggesting that the paragraph that refers to youth, the one that was the previous number 9, that about women and youth, is to delete after young people as the future leaders and just say leaders, youth as leaders, and leave it like that. Okay. Devashis, you have another suggestion?
Whenever you give me time, not this one.
I'll go back. We have number 1 was deleted. Number 2, we already agreed on the language. Number 3 is what we have the support from the Devashis. Yes, the previous number 3. Yeah. Yes, Devashis?
Because we deleted the last one, which is like a recommendation, but there were 2 terms there, 2 words, which I think we can still bring, if you agree. These 2 words are unwholesome and unjust. So it would read, likewise, we are concerned about some unwholesome and unjust climate actions. Thank you. Yes, the one is the climate action. I think now I forget, it's number 2 now.
Twice, we are concerned about
some unwholesome.
Can we say improper?
I would prefer unwholesome, but I can live with improper. Because improper is more like decorum, process, etiquette. Unwholesome, it is on the whole not good, undesirable. I can live with undesirable.
Okay.
Unwholesome.
Estamos preocupados. No sé cómo se traduce eso, pero asimismo estamos preocupados sobre acciones no deseables e injustas, acciones climáticas no deseables e injustas en grandes proyectos de energía renovable que involucran la transición energética mineral a través de la minería que está siendo impuesta sobre nuestros territorios sin nuestro consentimiento y en violación a nuestros derechos. Okay, French?
La proposition de Devachish est de mettre dans le paragraphe de même, nous sommes inquiets de projets pour l'action climatique malsains ou impropres et injustes. Et là, le débat est sur quel mot entre malsain et impropre.
The next one would be the one indigenous climate leadership faces challenges, including lack of recognition. This one, o sea, esto lo borramos, ¿no? Should we delete this one? Yeah, let's delete that one. But Mane was the one on discriminatory law. Yeah. Can we put it again? Do we have, look at the one that we are discussing now, the number 3. Indigenous climate leadership faces challenges, including lack of recognition and understanding of and respect of our governance. Yeah. So this is the one on challenges. So we keep this one. Okay, let's move to the, if we do not have observation on this one, let's move to the following. Mantenemos el que tiene, aquel que decía, Dios mío, estaba al final. Era el 9. El liderazgo indígena en materia climática se enfrenta a retos como la falta de reconocimiento, comprensión y respeto. Entonces, mantenemos eso como número 3. Vamos al siguiente. Y ahora vamos al, now we go to adaptation and the one on mitigation. Yeah. Que son los dos párrafos sobre el impacto, lo que estamos haciendo de adaptación y lo que estamos haciendo de mitigación. 4 and 5 are the paragraphs on adaptation and mitigation. Can we just delete the one on despite the daunting challenges? No, es que este es solo decir demonstrate resilience and active leadership at all levels. This is the introduction to the recommendation. Yeah. And we take out indigenous community-based adaptation. Yeah. And you take that, you take this indigenous community, yeah. Y saca este. Es que este iba después de adaptación.
Juste pour les francophones, on est en train de voir une structure qui commence avec les problématiques et qui après donne surtout sur les solutions. et en essayant en même temps d'enlever un peu de texte pour les rendre moins lourds. Et l'idée, c'est de probablement enlever les paragraphes avec les exemples adaptation, mitigation, mais plutôt dire on a ces défis et on a ces solutions. Et c'est sur la base de ces solutions, on donne les recommandations suivantes.
We are not deleting anything. We are only reorganizing the paragraphs to begin with the impact of climate change. Then we go into adaptation, what indigenous peoples are doing for adaptation, mitigation. And then we say, despite that, we continue doing this. And then we go into recommendations. Is there any concrete recommendation based on this? And then we can ask Valeria just to reorganize it, and then we read the preamble. But it would be in the following order. Number one, the one that you had as number 2 would be number 1. El que teníamos como número 2 sería el primer párrafo del preámbulo. Segundo párrafo sería el que teníamos como número 3. Second paragraph would be the one that we had as number 3. Fourth paragraph would be the one that we had as number 5. Community-based adaptations. Fifth, no. perdón. I'm confusing. Let's look at it aquí. Okay. So number one, we indigenous peoples are among those who are particularly affected by the impact of climate change. And then the disruption and children, youth, persons with disability, elderly have been added. El primer párrafo del preámbulo sería efectivamente el que teníamos como número 2.
Donc, ce qui est maintenant le paragraphe numéro 1, c'était le numéro 2 avant avec des ajouts par rapport aux enfants, les personnes avec disabilité. Oui.
Second paragraph would be the one that we had as number 3, but rephrase with what the Vashes has worked. El segundo párrafo sería el que teníamos como número 3, pero con la nueva redacción que ha hecho de Vashes.
Donc, ce qui est le deuxième maintenant, c'était avant le troisième avec la formulation que Devash a proposée.
Third paragraph would highlight the challenges that indigenous peoples leadership faces. That was the previous number 10. El tercer párrafo ya señala los desafíos que enfrentan pueblos indígenas para su liderazgo climático. Era el número 10.
Donc, le troisième, c'était avant le deuxième paragraphe sur le défi climatique dans la leadership sur le climat. Et peut-être...
The fourth paragraph would be the previous number 4, but without the second part of the previous paragraph, only mentioning that despite these challenges, we continue to demonstrate resilience. El cuarto párrafo era el cuarto anterior, que sin la segunda parte señala que a pesar de esos desafíos, los pueblos indígenas continúan manteniendo y demostrando la resiliencia. En francés.
Donc, le quatrième paragraphe, c'est toujours le quatrième avant, c'est le même, mais on a gardé seulement la première phrase pour ouvrir la discussion sur les actions d'adaptation et mitigation, et on a coupé la deuxième phrase.
The fifth and sixth paragraph present examples of that resilience. In the fifth paragraph, examples of adaptation. In the sixth paragraph, examples of mitigation. Los párrafos 5 y 6 son ejemplos de esa resiliencia. El párrafo 5, ejemplos de adaptación, y párrafo 6, ejemplos de mitigación que ya estaban dentro del documento.
Donc, le paragraphe 5 et 6 font référence aux exemples d'action d'adaptation et mitigation qui étaient déjà dans le document avant, mais on les a placés ici.
7, veamos el 7. The paragraph number 7 is the one that we had previously also as number 7. And it says that we reinforce adaptation and mitigation measures by strengthening traditional organizational systems and institutions, building partnership. The only thing that we did, no, we have it the same. It hasn't changed. The previous number 7. El número 7 es el mismo número 7 que teníamos anteriormente, que dice que enforzamos esas acciones a través del sistema organizativo tradicional, etcétera. No ha cambiado nada, sino que es el previo número 7.
Le numéro 7 est resté le même qu'avant et fait référence au renforcement des organisations traditionnelles de peuples autochtones.
Number 8 is the same, the previous number 8. And it reaffirms what we are saying in number 7, that it's anchored on our ways of knowing and being, etc. It's the same thing. It hasn't changed. El número 8 es el mismo número 8 anterior. Lo que hace es señalar que el liderazgo de pueblos indígenas está basada en nuestras formas de ver, conocer, etc. No cambia.
Donc, le numéro 8 aussi est resté le même, paragraphe 8 qu'on avait dans le document initial. Il faut faire référence à la leadership basée sur les traditions et le savoir des peuples autochtones.
Number 9 is the one on highlight the important role of women, and the only change is that we deleted youth as future leaders, and we just leave youth leaders. El número 9 es el mismo número 9 anterior que habla sobre el papel de las mujeres, y el único cambio es que se quitó al final donde dice futuros líderes al referirse a jóvenes.
Le paragraphe 9 est resté aussi le même, il fait référence aux jeunes et aux femmes. Et ce qu'on a fait, c'est dans la dernière phrase, on a levé la référence aux jeunes avec le leader futur et on a seulement laissé comme leader, en tant que leader.
Number 10 and number 11 are the last two, and the number 10 is recognizing IFAD as an important partner, and number 10 is just presenting the recommendations. Número 10 y número 11 son los que teníamos con los que concluía la resolución, el preámbulo, que es reconocer a IFAD como un partner y la presentación de las recomendaciones.
Et finalement, les paragraphes 10 et 11 sont ce qu'avant on avait à la fin du document, qui font référence au rôle du FIDA en tant que partenaire, et le dernier qui ouvre aux recommandations.
The new order of the preamble. Because of time, we will not go into each paragraph. I will ask if there are any specific changes that you would like to make at this point. Yes?
Madam Chair, can you go to number 5, please? So here we are talking about the challenges, and then we are giving an examples of our resilience and adaptation. What I'm not okay with is the first two, because those are not something that is as per our indigenous knowledge. That is because we are forced to. So can we think of removing the first two? That the rest are okay. Adjusting agriculture calendars and adapting more resilient varieties of seed. So we are doing that, I know, but that is not as per our traditional knowledge, but just because we are forced because of the climate change.
can measure. We are putting examples of what indigenous communities are doing in their communities. This is what came up from the recommendations. These are the things that communities are doing in their. Would you agree with them?
Yes, I'm agreeing to that. Point is, basically, what we are saying is so basically that's not the traditional system, traditional knowledge that we have. So we are just going the way the climate change is leading to us. So why not being resilient to what we actually know, and maybe we hold on to and then fight climate change. So these two doesn't really say that we are just trying to survive in the climate change. That's what, according to me, I understand it that way.
I'm just trying to address Roshan's. I think that everybody is forced to adapt. So I think it's not just that the non-indigenous world is forcing the indigenous peoples to have to adapt to climate change. I think it is, it's our common sense. And I think we have adapted for actually centuries. We just didn't call it climate change. We deal with 3-month winter, summer climate change like that, but we haven't dealt with it at the scale that we're doing now. But I think so it's, we also have been adapting both traditionally and we are adapting, but the circumstances have changed. This is the global climate change. That was something else. That was little climate change. So I think, and we are adapting and we are adaptable and to exercise resilience in continuing to exist, we have to show innovations and adaptations. So that way, I think this is something irrespective of indigenous or non-indigenous, that we are learning to live with the world that is changing. So that way, I think, I don't know if I can urge Roshanji to see that this is not necessarily negative.
With your permission, Madam Chair, no, I'm not saying it's negative. Only thing is like what I saw it was like, it's not coming from what indigenous peoples originally are. So it is, because next what we are saying is we are also diversifying the agriculture. So that I think already addresses what we are already doing. So that was all. So it's just a suggestion. Like I agree what we are talking about here. I understand that. Only thing was like it looked as if climate change is driving us and we are just following us. So it looked as if we are doing that. So it was just that was my observation. Thank you.
Do we agree with the preamble?
Yes.
Ulay? We agree.
Agree.
¿Estamos de acuerdo con el preámbulo, cómo va hasta el momento con estos cambios? Okay. Muchas gracias. Thank you, everybody, for all your support. This has been very difficult, but we have a synthesis of deliberation that is still long. We only have 40 minutes for lunch. 40. We have to be here by 2. Solo disponemos de 40 minutos para la comida. Hay que estar de nuevo de regreso a las 2. Muchas gracias por su colaboración. Friends.
Nous avons
Nous n'avons que 40 minutes pour le déjeuner. Il faudrait revenir en salle à 14 heures. Merci. Merci.